Hello everyone. There is a saying of Nat Turner, good communication is the bridge between confusion and clarity. Communication exists since the dawn of life in this world. Growth in science and technology remove the locational disadvantage effectively. Information can be exchanged from one person to another everywhere on this earth, right from the developments made in communication by great scientists like J.C. Bose, G. Marconi, and Alexander Graham Bell. Communication has witnessed leaps and bounds. The communication industry is one of the largest in size and is the oldest since communication through telegraph, telephone, and radio started centuries back. The intensive research in the mid and late 19th century leads to the development of long distance transmission in the shortest possible time. However, the 20th century witnessed a leap over the development of communication, meeting the demands of speed and secure transfer of data. Every sector in the world is experiencing a significant profit with the advent of global positioning system, satellite, mobile, and optical communications. This unit provides a glimpse of the basic concepts of electronic communication and its applications. Outline of my presentation: introduction, block diagram of a communication system, elements of an electronic communication system, modulation, propagation of electromagnetic waves, satellite communication, mobile communication, fiber optic communication, radar, and finally summary. The introduction. Let me start with what is communication and also electronic communication. Communication is the process of sending message from one place and receiving it at the other place through some means. And electronic communication can be defined as the communication which uses electronic media to transmit the information or message using computers, email, telephone, video calling, fax machine, etc. This type of communication can be developed by sharing data like images, graphics, sound, pictures, maps, software, and many things. Basically, there are two modes of communication. One is point to point mode, and the other is broadcast mode. In point to point mode, communication occurs over a link between a single transmitter and a receiver. And in broadcast mode, communication takes place over links to a large number of receivers from a single transmitter. This figure shows the block diagram of a general communication system in which the different functional elements are represented by blocks. A communication system contains three elements: transmitter, channel, and receiver. Transmitter is the arrangement that processes the message signal into a suitable form for transmission and subsequently reception. A channel refers to a physical medium such as wire, cables, space through which the signal is passed from the transmitter to the receiver. Receiver is an arrangement that extracts the message or information from the transmitted signal at the output end of the channel and reproduces it to a suitable form as the original message signal. Block diagram of transmission and reception of voice signals. The transmitting part consists of an input transducer, amplifier, oscillator, modulator, power amplifier, and an antenna. The receiving part consists of an antenna, radio receiver, demodulator, power amplifier. Elements of an electronic communication system. Information. Information is the message that is to be transmitted. It can be in the form of audio, video, temperature, picture, pressure, etc. Transducer. A device or an arrangement that converts one form of energy to the other, and electrical transducer converts physical variables such as pressure, force, temperature into corresponding electrical signal variations. Input transducer. In communication system, the transducer converts the information which is in the form of sound, music, pictures or computer data into corresponding electrical signals. The electrical equivalent of the original information is called the baseband signal. The best example for the transducer is the microphone that converts sound energy into electrical energy. Signal. The information converted into electrical or optical form, whichever is suitable for transmission, is called a signal, and it may be analog or digital. Amplifier. The electronic circuit or device that increases the amplitude or the strength of the transmitted signal is called an amplifier. When the signal strength from the transducer output is very weak, amplification is done. Oscillator. It generates high frequency carrier wave for long distance transmission into space. Modulator. As the original message signal cannot be transmitted over a large distance because of their low frequency and amplitude, they are superimposed with high frequency and amplitude wave called carrier wave. This phenomenon of superimposing of message signal with a carrier wave is called modulation, and the resultant wave is a modulated wave which is to be transmitted. Power amplifier. It increases the power level of the electrical signal in order to cover a large distance. Antenna. An antenna is a structure or a device that will radiate and receive electromagnetic waves. So, they are used in both transmitters and receivers. An antenna is basically a metallic object, often a collection of wires. The electromagnetic waves are polarized according to the position of the antenna. Noise. Noise is one of the channel imperfection caused by external and internal sources in the received signal at the destination. External sources include interference from nearby transmitted signals, that is crosstalk, interference generated by a natural source such as lightning, solar or cosmic radiation, automobile generated radiation, etc. Internal sources include noise due to random motion and collision of electrons in the conductors, thermal noise due to diffusion and recombination of charge carriers in other electronic devices. Noise can be minimized by various techniques. Repeaters. Repeaters are placed at different locations in between the transmitter and receiver. A repeater receives the transmitted signal, amplifies it, and sends it to the next repeater without distorting the original signal. Demodulator. It is the inverse phenomenon of modulation. The process of separation of message signal from the carrier wave takes place in the demodulator. The information is retrieved from the modulated wave. Output transducer. It converts the electrical signal back to its original form, such as sound, music, picture, or data. Examples of output transducers are loudspeakers, picture tubes, computer monitor, etc. Attenuation. The loss of strength of a signal while propagating through a medium is known as attenuation. Distortion. It is also another type of channel problem. When the signal is distorted, the distorted signal may have frequency and bandwidth different from the transmitted signal. The variation in the signal frequency can be linear or non-linear. Range. It is the maximum distance between the source and the destination up to which the signal is received with sufficient strength. Bandwidth. The frequency range over which the baseband signals or the information signals such as voice, music, picture, etc. is transmitted. Bandwidth of transmission system. The range of frequencies required to transmit a piece of specified information in a particular channel is called channel bandwidth or the bandwidth of the transmission system. Modulation. the transmission of information through short distances does not require complicated techniques. The energy of the information signal is sufficient enough to be sent directly. However, if the information, for example, audio frequency of the range 20 to 20,000 Hz needs to be transmitted to long distances across the world, certain techniques are required to transmit the information without any loss. For long distance transmission, the low frequency baseband signal, that is, the input signal, is superimposed onto a high frequency radio signal by a process called modulation. In the modulation process, a very high frequency signal called carrier signal, that is the radio signal, is used to carry the baseband signal. There are three types of modulation based on which parameter is modified. They are amplitude modulation, frequency modulation, and phase modulation. Amplitude modulation. The amplitude of the carrier signal is modified in proportion to the instantaneous amplitude of the baseband signal, then it is called amplitude modulation. Here, the frequency and phase of the carrier signal remain constant. Amplitude modulation is used in radio and TV broadcasting. Advantages of amplitude modulation: easy transmission and reception, lesser bandwidth requirements, and low cost. Limitations of AM: noise level is high, low efficiency, and small operating range. Frequency modulation: the frequency of the carrier signal is modified in proportion to the instantaneous amplitude of the baseband signal in frequency modulation. Here, the amplitude and phase of the carrier signal remain constant. Increase in amplitude of the baseband signal increases the frequency of the carrier signal and vice versa. Advantages of FM: large decrease in noise, and this leads to an increase in signal to noise ratio. The operating range is quite large. The transmission efficiency is very high as all the transmitted power is useful. FM bandwidth covers entire frequency range which humans can hear. Due to this, FM radio has better quality compared to AM radio. Limitations of FM: FM requires a much wider channel. FM transmitters and receivers are more complex and costly. In FM reception, less area is covered compared to AM. Phase modulation. In phase modulation, the instantaneous amplitude of the baseband signal modifies the phase of the carrier signal, keeping the amplitude and frequency constant. This modulation is used to generate frequency modulated signals. It is similar to frequency modulation except that the phase of the carrier is varied instead of varying frequency. Advantages of PM: FM signal produced from PM signal is very stable, and the center frequency called resting frequency is extremely stable. Propagation of electromagnetic waves. The information signal modulated with the carrier wave is transmitted by an antenna. This travels through the space and received by the receiving antenna at the other end. The frequencies from 2 kHz to 400 GHz are transmitted through wireless communication. The strength of the electromagnetic wave keeps decreasing while traveling from transmitter to the receiver. The electromagnetic waves transmitted by the transmitter travels in three different modes to reach the receiver according to its frequency range. Ground wave propagation or surface wave propagation are nearly 2 kHz to 2 MHz. Skywave propagation or ionospheric propagation nearly 3 MHz to 30 MHz. Space wave propagation nearly 30 MHz to 400 GHz. Ground wave propagation: if the electromagnetic waves transmitted by the transmitter glide over the surface of the earth to reach the receiver, Then the propagation is called ground wave propagation. The corresponding waves are called ground waves or surface waves. It is mainly used in local broadcasting, radio navigation for ship to shore communication, and mobile communication. Skywave propagation, the mode of propagation in which the electromagnetic waves radiated from an antenna directed upwards at large angles get reflected by the ionosphere back to earth is called skywave propagation or ionospheric propagation. The corresponding waves are called sky waves. The shortest distance between the transmitter and the point of reception of the skywave along the surface is called the skip distance. And the skip zone is a zone where there is no reception of electromagnetic waves, neither ground nor sky, called it is skip area. Space Space wave propagation. The process of sending and receiving information signal through space is called space wave communication. The electromagnetic waves of very high frequencies above 30 megahertz are called as space waves. These waves travel in a straight line from the transmitter to the receiver, hence, it is used for a line of sight communication. Communication. The satellite communication is a mode of communication of signal between transmitter and receiver via satellite. The message signal from the earth station is transmitted to the satellite on board via an uplink frequency band of 6 GHz, amplified by a transponder and then retransmitted to another earth station via a downlink of frequency band 4 GHz. Mobile communication. Mobile communication is used to communicate with others in different locations without the use of any physical connection like wires or cables. It allows the transmission over a wide range of area without the use of the physical link. It enables the people to communicate with each other regardless of a particular location like office, house, etc. It also provides communication access to remote areas. Fiber optic communication, the method of transmitting information from one place to another in terms of light pulses through an optical fiber is called fiber optic communication. It works under the principle of total internal reflection. Radar. Radar basically stands for radio detection and ranging system. It is one of the important applications of communication systems and is mainly used to sense, detect, and locate distant objects like aircraft, ships, spacecraft, etc. The angle, range, or velocity of the objects that are invisible to the human eye can be determined. Radar communication is used summary. The basic elements required for the transmission and reception of a signal through long distance using electromagnetic waves are transducer, amplifier, carrier, signal modulator, power amplifier, medium of transmission, transmitting and receiving antenna, demodulator, detector. For long distance transmission, the baseband signal is modulated with the carrier wave. If the amplitude of the carrier signal is modified with the instantaneous amplitude of the baseband signal, then it is called amplitude modulation. If the frequency of the carrier signal is modified with the instantaneous frequency of the baseband signal, then it is called frequency modulation. The instantaneous amplitude of the baseband signal modifies the phase of the carrier signal. Keeping the amplitude and frequency constant is called phase modulation. If the EM waves transmitted by the transmitter glide over the surface of the earth to reach the receiver, then the propagation of electromagnetic waves is called ground wave propagation. Electromagnetic waves radiated from an antenna directed upwards at large angles gets reflected by the ionosphere back to earth is called skywave propagation. The process of sending and receiving information signal through space is called space wave communication. The satellite communication is a mode of communication of signal between transmitter and receiver via satellite. Mobile communication is used to communicate with others in different locations without the use of any physical connection like wires or cables. Fiber optic communication is a method of transmitting information by sending pulses of light through an optical fiber. Radar basically stands for radio detection and ranging system and one of the important applications of communication systems for remote sensing. Thank you.